I never imagined that a simple Saturday morning could turn into a full-blown HOA nightmare, but that's exactly what happened. My wife Sarah had spent weeks meticulously planting flowers along our front yard, creating a colorful border that made our home look like it belonged in a magazine. It was her pride and joy. Yet, just as she stepped back to admire her work, the HOA president, someone we barely knew, appeared at our doorstep, clipboard in hand, and accused her of violating community rules. Her words hit like a punch. "You're in violation. Those plants are not permitted, and the HOA rules are clear. You need to remove them immediately." Sarah, ever polite but firm, tried to explain that the flowers were a gift from a neighbor and that they didn't interfere with any regulations. But before she could finish, the HOA president interrupted, her tone sharp, almost theatrical, like she was delivering a verdict in a courtroom. I stepped outside, confused. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you?" I asked, hoping to de-escalate the situation. That's when she dropped the bomb. "I'm the new HOA president," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something in me clicked instantly. The sudden authority, the power in her voice, the way she surveyed our yard like a general inspecting a battlefield. And that's when I realized why she had approached us with such certainty, bypassing any neighborly courtesy. I tried to reason with her, pulling out the HOA handbook and highlighting the section about decorative landscaping. According to this, these plants are allowed as long as they don't extend beyond the designated area, I said, hoping logic would prevail. She waved it off, dismissing the rules like they were written on someone else's property. "I make the final call now. Consider this a formal notice," she declared, as if the power of the HOA had suddenly made her the law itself. As I stood there, I noticed something odd. A subtle but unmistakable gleam in her eyes, a mix of triumph and mischief. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the flowers at all. This was about control, about asserting dominance over anyone who might challenge her authority. And worse, she had no idea she was about to push the wrong person. At the wrong time, I looked at Sarah, her hands trembling slightly, but her expression unbroken, and knew we had a choice. We could back down, quietly remove the flowers, and avoid further conflict. Or we could stand our ground, fight for what was right, and show this new HOA president that her power had limits. Before I could even voice my decision, she wrote something down on her clipboard, gave a final nod, and left. But the tension lingered like a storm cloud over our front yard. Little did we know, this confrontation was only the beginning of a series of escalating events that would challenge our patience, our marriage, and our sanity. The next morning, the tension from the previous day hadn't eased. It had only multiplied. I could sense it in the way Sarah moved through the house cautiously, like she was anticipating another HOA ambush. I tried to assure her, "Don't worry, we'll handle this logically," but even I felt a knot forming in my stomach. There's something about facing someone in power who doesn't play fair that makes your nerves taut like a high-wire act with no safety net. By mid-morning, I decided to check the HOA's online portal, hoping to find some clarity. That's when I discovered something unexpected, a complete roster of the HOA board along with the minutes from their recent meetings. As I scrolled through the documents, a chilling pattern emerged. The new president, Karen, as we now knew her, had already overruled multiple homeowners on trivial matters, often citing vague interpretations of the rules. There were complaints about flower beds, garden gnomes, even small welcome mats. No one seemed safe from her scrutiny. Curiosity turned into concern when I read a note about an upcoming community meeting scheduled just 3 days from now. Karen had submitted a motion to review and revise landscaping guidelines, which basically meant she could retroactively accuse anyone of violations. My stomach dropped. If she got her way, Sarah's garden, her personal project, would be in jeopardy. And knowing Karen, she wouldn't hesitate to use her position to punish anyone who questioned her. Sarah joined me, peering at the screen over my shoulder. "So, she's basically rewriting the rules to fit her preferences?" she asked, incredulous. I nodded grimly. "Exactly. And if we don't act carefully, she could claim you're in violation before you even know it. She exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. Then we'll just have to make sure we're prepared, she said, her tone firm. That's when I realized that this wasn't just about flowers anymore. It was about principle, fairness, and standing up to someone who equated title with unquestionable authority. We spent the afternoon compiling evidence, photos of the garden, dated receipts for the plants, and even emails from neighbors praising Sarah's landscaping. I couldn't help but notice how meticulous Karen was, and it made me realize that fighting her would require the same precision. Every detail mattered. Every word could be used against us or in our favor. By evening, we had a plan. We would attend the HOA meeting, armed with facts, documentation, and a calm, measured approach. The thought of confrontation made my heart race, but it also ignited a sense of determination. For Sarah, for our home, and for the principle of fairness, we couldn't back down. Little did we know, Karen's tactics would escalate far beyond mere garden rules, and our simple fight over flowers would soon spiral into a battle that affected the entire neighborhood. The day of the HOA meeting arrived faster than I expected. Sarah and I entered the community center, our evidence neatly organized and our nerves buzzing with anticipation. The room was filled with familiar faces, but the atmosphere was tense, like everyone was bracing for a storm. And in the center of it all sat Karen, the new president, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room as if daring anyone to challenge her authority. As the meeting began, Karen wasted no time. She launched into a detailed critique of recent landscaping violations, highlighting minor infractions with an almost theatrical flair. It was clear she had prepared for this moment, rehearsing every word and gesture. I couldn't help but notice the smug satisfaction in her expression. She believed she had already won before anyone even spoke. When our turn came, I stepped forward, handing out copies of our evidence packets. Sarah followed closely, her hands steady, her voice calm. "We'd like to address the recent concern about our garden," she began, and immediately Karen cut her off. "Please, we'll get to you in due time," she said, waving her hand dismissively. My jaw tightened. This was exactly what I had feared. Karen wasn't here to listen. She was here to control the narrative, but we stayed composed. When Karen finally allowed us to speak, Sarah presented our documentation, dated photos showing when each plant was installed, receipts proving their legality under HOA rules, and supportive emails from neighbors who had seen her work from the start. Every point was methodical, every fact clear. I could see some of the attendees nodding, whispering among themselves, realizing Karen's claims were far from justified. Karen's composure started to crack. Her sharp retorts grew more defensive, and her attempts to redirect the conversation fell flat. One resident even questioned the legitimacy of her new rule revisions, pointing out that the HOA board had yet to approve any changes officially. Karen's confident mask faltered as murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. For the first time, I saw doubt creep into her eyes. Then came the turning point. A neighbor stood and spoke directly to Karen, reminding everyone that the HOA's purpose was to support the community, not wield power arbitrarily. Karen tried to respond, but her words sounded hollow against the weight of logic and unity in the room. It was as if the very authority she clung to was slipping through her fingers. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to uphold our garden's legality, and Karen had no choice but to accept it. The room exhaled collectively, a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. As we left, Sarah smiled, exhausted but victorious. And I realized this fight wasn't just about flowers. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up to someone who believed power was absolute. After the HOA meeting, the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Word had spread quickly that Karen, the new president, had been challenged and ultimately overruled. People approached us, congratulating Sarah and me for standing our ground, and I realized how deeply her attempts at control had affected more than just our family. This fight wasn't just about flowers anymore. It had become a statement for the entire community. Despite the victory, Karen didn't disappear quietly. Over the next few days, subtle tensions lingered, passive-aggressive emails, veiled comments at the mailbox, and the occasional pointed stare across the street. She seemed determined to reassert her dominance, and I understood that she wouldn't let this go easily. But by then, we were prepared. We had documentation, witnesses, and, most importantly, confidence in our position. One afternoon, Sarah and I received a letter from the HOA office. Not just a routine notice, but a formal announcement of a revised policy meeting. At first, I braced myself for another confrontation, expecting Karen to try and rewrite the rules in her favor. Instead, the letter was strangely conciliatory, acknowledging the importance of community input and emphasizing cooperation over arbitrary enforcement. It was a small victory, but it signaled a shift. Our resistance had made an impact. Neighbors began approaching Karen differently, too. They asked questions, demanded clarifications, and insisted on transparency. It was clear that the community's tolerance for unilateral decisions had diminished, and Karen, for all her bluster, was learning that authority alone wasn't enough to command respect. Our stand had inspired others to speak up, and the power dynamics within the HOA had quietly begun to change. Sarah returned to her garden with renewed enthusiasm. Every flower, every carefully placed plant felt like a symbol of persistence and courage. I watched her work, realizing that this fight had strengthened us in ways we hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about defending our yard. It was about asserting our right to live without fear of unreasonable interference and teaching the neighborhood that fairness could prevail over intimidation. In the end, Karen remained the HOA president, but her influence had been tempered. She learned that leadership wasn't about control, but accountability and respect. Our victory was subtle yet profound, changing the way neighbors interacted and empowering homeowners to protect their rights. And for Sarah and me, it was a reminder that standing up for what's right, even against someone in power, could make a tangible difference. As we sipped tea in the backyard, surrounded by vibrant blooms and a newfound sense of peace, I couldn't help but smile. The battle had been exhausting, nerve-wracking, and at times infuriating, but we had won. And this time, the garden wasn't just beautiful. It was victorious. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more crazy HOA Karen moments, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Smash the like button if you can't believe what she did. And drop a comment below telling us what you would do if you faced a Karen like this in your neighborhood. We read every comment, and your story might even be featured in our next video.